Ladies and gentlemen, 2022 Wimbledon is behind us. Like everything else in tennis this year, it was filled with controversies. Court speed complaints, ranking points, grunting disputes, toilet breaks, injuries, and even a bromance. In this video, we will look at 8 things that stood out in 2022 Wimbledon. Let's begin. Number 1. It was a special title for Djokovic. This title meant a lot to Novak. Of course, every Wimbledon title means a lot, but Novak was especially emotional this time. And judging by comments on social media, his fans felt the same way. In interviews after the final, both Novak and his coach, Goran Ivanišević, talked about how the ordeal in Australia hurt Novak mentally and emotionally. Novak explained that he didn't even know how much it affected him until he returned to competition. When he came back on the tour, he realized that he wasn't himself and that it would take him time and effort to get over the trauma. And this goes back to what I said in the last video. We will never see a fair conclusion to the Big Three era, because it wasn't just a Grand Slam title that they took from Novak, and all the Masters events he couldn't play, ATP points, weeks at number 1, and all the rest that they have stolen from him. They also hurt him mentally and emotionally, stopped the momentum that he carried from last season, and robbed him of tennis form and confidence. What makes this title special is that Novak once again found a way to get back to his feet. In 2018, he recovered from injury to win Wimbledon. This year, he recovered from injustice. Number 2. Nadal's withdrawal from the semifinals was a bitch move. His fans will say that he was really injured and that his serve was slow against Fritz, but who cares? I'm sick and tired of this guy's drama with his supposed injuries. Just a few days after, he was already jet skiing, and later he was filmed dancing in a nightclub. The way he's shaking his moneymaker, his abs don't seem to be injured. You never know with this liar. The point is that he again withdrew from an event where he was not likely to win. He realized he couldn't beat Kyrgios and was even less likely to beat Djokovic. So he made a calculated choice to let Kyrgios rest for the final. And I'm not the only one saying it. ESPN commentators talked about this during Breakfast at Wimbledon broadcast.
Now he wants to stop Novak Djokovic from capturing this title because then he's got 21 versus 22 for himself. Maybe part of his calculation was to send Nick Kyrgios into this championship match, I guess, number 1.
Yes, he's saying the Nadal camp is sending in a fresh Nick to stop Djokovic.
Well, if you looked at the 2 players in the draw that Nadal would least likely want to lose to, 2 would be Kyrgios, but 1 would be Djokovic.
And let's not forget that Federer did the exact same thing last year, when he withdrew from Roland Garros to let Berrettini rest before facing Novak. Both Federer and Nadal are repeatedly proving that they are not the knights in shiny armor that the media has been portraying for the last 20 years. Number 3. Nadal once again used toilet breaks and fake injuries to disrupt his opponents. And he even added a new tactic to his repertoire. He now summons his opponents to the net and lectures them about behavior on court. In his match against Sonego, right after Sonego broke his serve, Nadal called him to the net and told him to stop grunting. You heard it correctly. Nadal was lecturing others about grunting. This gesture from Nadal is not only disgusting, hypocritical, and unsportsmanlike. It is against the rules. A player is not allowed to talk to his opponent. But of course, the umpire said nothing, and Nadal wasn't punished or even warned after the match. And of course, the media had very little to say about the incident. So now I will. Nadal's arrogant behavior is a direct consequence of the favoritism he's enjoyed his entire career. And especially this year. Since the beginning of this season, Nadal has been getting away with everything. Traveling when he was infected with COVID, smearing Novak in Australia instead of helping him as a member of the player council, countless acts of gamesmanship, favorable scheduling, shady medical treatments for his many supposed ailments, backstabbing political moves that made a mockery of rankings, and all of this without ever facing any scrutiny from the mainstream media. But there is silver lining to all of this. Nadal is showing his true face. The blatant favoritism has gone to his head, and his bullying of Sonego shows that he is power tripping. Even though Federer is equally privileged, He never acted like a thug, never faked injuries, and usually keeps his mouth shut. I gotta give him that. Number 4. Who I wish kept their mouths shut are most journalists. Not only are they blatantly biased, but they have once again exposed themselves as a tool of the establishment. Right after Kyrgios made the quarterfinals, virtually every major news outlet published reports about his court case in Australia. It seemed to be the next hot topic and potentially a big distraction for Nick in his match against Nadal. But for some reason, after Nadal withdrew from the semifinal, the mainstream media collectively and simultaneously lost all interest in Kyrgios' legal troubles. With the media darling out of the tournament, there was no point anymore to smear his opponent. This wasn't the only time during the tournament that reporters put a foot in their own mouth. When the news came out that Cilic and Berrettini both had COVID and had to withdraw, The Guardian ran a story in which they mentioned that Cilic practiced with Djokovic, but they conveniently left out that Berrettini practiced with Nadal. When the fans called this out, the media also gave up on that story. And it wasn't only the media hyenas who tried to help Nadal win Wimbledon. The tournament organizers also made a decent effort. Which brings us to number 5. Court speeds. Another story that hasn't been covered much in the mainstream is that the courts were apparently slower than ever. The Australian Jordan Thompson declared that this year the grass courts were slower than the French Open. He said, "The balls feel particularly heavy and the grass just feels super slow. I don't know what they've done, but it's definitely slower." And Kyrgios ranted about it during the match. The court speed data is not yet available, so I can't confirm what the player said. But there was something else this year that slowed down the court in the main stadium, the center court. It is traditional, and nobody takes tradition more seriously than Wimbledon, that nobody steps on the grass until the defending men's champion plays the opening match of the tournament on center court. But this year, in an unprecedented departure from tradition, for the first time ever, players practiced on center court before the tournament started. This wore down the grass and exposed the dirt underneath, making the court slower.
Why, Novak? Why?
Because slower courts favor Nadal. I guess Wimbledon was willing to trample even their own traditions to install a desperate pretender on the throne. Number 6. Speaking of thrones, another Wimbledon tradition is that a member of the royal family hands out trophies to winners. One of the reasons why Wimbledon banned Russians this year is because they didn't want a member of the royal family to have to hand the trophy to a Russian. But in the end, that's exactly what happened. Elena Rybakina, who won the women's title, is Russian. She was born and raised in Moscow, and she represented Russia in her first 5 years as a pro. She took Kazakhstani citizenship 4 years ago because they offered her financial support in exchange for representing them. It is now recorded in history that on July 9th, 2022, on the 100th anniversary of Wimbledon Centre Court, Duchess of Cambridge, a member of the English royal family, handed the Wimbledon trophy to a Russian. They should put this image in the dictionary next to the expression Poetic Justice. Number 7. They could put Federer and Nadal's picture next to the word hypocrites, because that's exactly what they are. After they aggressively lobbied to strip ranking points from Wimbledon to supposedly punish Wimbledon, they both took part in Wimbledon's centenary celebration. If Federer and Nadal so strongly wanted to punish Wimbledon, you would think that they would decline to be there. You would think that Nadal would refuse to play. Also, if removing points was a meaningful punishment for Wimbledon, you would think that the organizers wouldn't invite Federer and Nadal to their celebration. I said in the previous video that the fight between ATP and Wimbledon was nothing but an illusion for the public. You be the judge. And finally, number 8. Let's end this review the way Wimbledon ended, on a positive note. Men's final was great. Many questioned how Kyrgios would deal with the pressure of a slam final, but he rose to the occasion and the match was close. In the end, Novak's experience was decisive, but Kyrgios showed that he belongs on the biggest stage. When he's focused, he can be a contender for Grand Slams. But the best thing about this final was the aftermath. After years of publicly criticizing Djokovic, Kyrgios surprisingly came to his defense during the Australian Open scandal. In Novak's most difficult moment, when the entire tennis world turned their back on him, Nick was one of the few players who stood up for him. Novak thanked him over social media, but they didn't cross paths until Wimbledon. Their trophy ceremony speeches were hilarious, but there was more than just humor that felt good. Instead of the customary scripted praise that players usually heap on each other, their interaction was genuine. After Kyrgios said that he doesn't know if he'll ever play in a final again, the first thing Djokovic said in his speech was, "Nick, you'll be back." Although Novak never brought up the Australian saga, there was unspoken gratitude in every word that he said to Nick. On his part, Kyrgios was visibly disappointed after the match, but he didn't sulk through the whole ceremony as some others when they lose to Novak. Some are questioning if the bromance is real, but those people are haters. We witnessed two men bury their petty differences, recognize the good in each other, and move forward reconciled. It's the moment of healing that should have happened in Australia among the big three, but Federer and Nadal failed to recognize that opportunity. Instead, Nick Kyrgios recognized it. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. When going got tough for Novak, he stood by his principles, and Nick stood with him. Djokovic and Kyrgios break rackets, but they are good men, and they recognize that in each other. Thank you for watching, and I will talk to you soon.